was really proud, and he was a lawyer. Now, lawyers were just as bad back then. Sorry, that was not helpful. But this was a lawyer of like the Torah, of God's law. But he thought he had it all figured out. He thought he had God in a box. And so he came up to try to justify himself and say that he was really, really good and maybe even better than Jesus. And so he showed up and asked Jesus about how he could enter the kingdom and what does the law require, right? And so Jesus said, well, what do you think? What do you read? And he says, well, I'm supposed to love the Lord, my God, with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love my neighbor as myself. So Jesus said, well, go and do that. And he said, trying to justify himself because he knew he didn't do that very well. But he's like, well, who is my neighbor then? Who do I actually have to love? And Jesus, like any good teacher, told a story. Okay, so he told a story. And he said, well, there was a man one day. Oh, some people know this story. I might. So he's going for a journey. And he goes from Jerusalem to Jericho. This was kind of a treacherous journey with lots of hills and little caves and little places that people might hide. And he was going for a journey, and some robbers, some big bad bullies, jumped out and beat him up and took his donkey and all his stuff. And they left him on the side of the road and basically left him to die. He didn't have anyone to take care of him. He was all alone. And he wondered, what would happen to me? And then he saw in the distance a big, important, holy, religious person coming. He was a Levite. And he thought, oh good, one of God's servants is coming and he's going to help me. But this Levite, he had somewhere important to go. And you know what? He didn't want to be bothered by having to help someone because then he couldn't do God's work that he thought he needed to do. Did he kind of his priorities a little off? Yeah. Yep. So then he actually went on the opposite side of the road and went and kind of sped up a little bit. And he was also worried. He thought, what if the robbers are nearby? Right? That would actually be dangerous to help this person. I won't help them. I'm too important to be in danger. So he ran by and went back to do his important work. And then the man who's injured looks out and he says, oh, it's a priest coming. An extra super awesome, holy, special person.
Was it Steve?
Let's hope not. And so he looks out and sees, oh wow, okay, maybe he will help me. What do you think he did?
No.
So this priest, he had to stay super duper holy, right? And he had this idea that if he touched someone who was bloody or dirty or hurt, he wouldn't be super duper holy anymore. So he also went on the opposite side of the street and ran. Wow, avoided him and ran from him. And the guy lost heart. He thought, oh, nothing's going to happen. I don't have hope. And then he saw someone coming. He said, who is that? Who's coming? Who's coming? Who is it? And then he saw it was a Samaritan. Now, back in those days, we don't do this today, but there was a lot of people didn't like each other, and if you were like from one background, one neighborhood, they didn't like the people from the other neighborhood. We don't deal with that today anymore. Actually, we do. But so basically, he was from a bad neighborhood, and he was one of the people that his mommy and daddy, when he was young, told him, you shouldn't like those people. They're bad people. And he grew up thinking they're bad people. And it was a Samaritan. So you know what the Samaritan did? He came up and helped the man. Right? He took him, he bandaged his owies, he put him on his own donkey, and he walked the man through the road and got to Jericho, and he brought him to a special inn. Right? Inns where he could get cared for, and he'd have a bed to rest on, and he took care of all his owies, and then he had to go and do his business that he was already late for because he helped out this man. So he told the innkeeper, he says, here is about $200. Okay? This will pay for him to stay here and take care of him. And I'll come back around next time, and if I owe you any more money for his care, I'll pay for it. Okay? And the man went his own way. And then that was the story Jesus told. And so he asked the super duper ultra important religious person, the lawyer, right, who knew all the right answers, or so he thought. He said, who was a neighbor He just said, the one who had mercy. So he said, go, do the same thing. Do the same thing. And the man left, and he was kind of proud and, I can't do that. So here's a couple questions we'll ask. You guys raise your hand and give me an answer. What does this story teach us about Jesus? Yes, Elliot? Oh, she said, even if you're told you think you have a job to do, but you see you have an opportunity to do something good, you know what? You can skip your other job and do the good thing and help someone. Yeah, and Jesus did that for us. He was always letting himself get interrupted. Yes, go ahead.
So Jesus can help somebody who's bloody or hurt or unclean and still be super holy? Yes. Yeah, that his holiness, he reaches out. He does that with the lepers, right? Everyone's afraid to touch them, right? And he reaches out and touches them. And rather than the uncleanness transferring to him, his cleanness transfers to us. Okay. Yes, Anne-Marie. How to take care of people. Yeah, okay. Now, last question I'll ask is, what does this story teach us about people? What do we learn about what people can be like? Someone else who hasn't raised their hand yet. Yeah, go ahead. Say a little louder. Go ahead. Yeah, some people can be really kind and some people cannot be so kind. Yeah, and Jesus really challenges us, right? That we don't get to pick our favorite neighbors, right? The call to love is to love all people. Yes, Abigail. Some people think they're more important and they don't need the help. Or maybe you might even pray, like you drive by the hitchhiker, right? You're like, Lord, please, I hope someone else picks them up. He doesn't have somewhere to go. Right? Yeah. Someone who has older upholstery on their seat. Yeah. There you go.
Guilty, sorry.
Confession time. Okay, one more. What does it teach us about people? Someone else who hasn't. One of these little ones up front. You have ideas? I don't think so. Not quite yet. Dave has something.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that you're supposed to love God, that's number one, and then love your neighbor, anyone in need, that's number two. And that's just interesting, because when we see people, we often think, I really want to love God, but we don't think that how we show it is to love anyone that's in need. We just don't think that, and we should.
Yeah. You said that, right? How can you love God who you do not say when you hate the brother you do see? Thank you so much for listening, kids. You guys can go back to your seats. You were a wonderful storyteller group.
It's crowded back there, there's 50 seats in the very front.
Yeah, there's seats up front. I don't spit, or at least there's enough space in between wherever you won't get spit on. Oh, you want to sit with me? You can sit right there, bud. Yeah, Levi, you can't sit. You're going to be distracting. And maybe you take it back to mom, please. Okay. So, adults, how radical is that story? How it challenges, so these are our people words, right? It challenges our racism, our classism, right? Our religious prejudices. Can some of you guys volunteer to move forward? Because people will come and find their way in, and it's harder if you're the last person in to grab the front row. So, be a little sacrificial for you.
Is this an altar call?
Just a call to the front row. Yeah, so we're going to try to apply some of the Good Samaritan story as well as Luke chapter 6. And we're going to talk about what that means for our mission and call as Grassroots Church. And now I'm going to share some stories as I have time at the end about
we do in Portland with Muslim background people. So we try to break down some of those cultural and religious walls. So turn with me to Luke chapter 6. I'm just going to read it together. It's Luke chapter 6, verse 27. So this is Jesus speaking. He says, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who persecute you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you. And from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and evil. Be merciful even as your Father is merciful." So Jesus radically, right, he speaks into these divisions that we have in our culture, in our community. And this radical love has defined the church since the beginning. And I want to share a couple quotes from the early church. Now, in 252 AD, there was a plague in the city of Carthage. And this is when Christians were this persecuted minority. And so they would take them into the center of the city, and they would feed them to lions, and they would torture them and ask them to renounce Jesus. And so it was pretty gnarly being a Christian back then. But there was this crazy plague that went through this city of Carthage. We have record of it today, where just vast majorities of the people died, and anyone that was still healthy fled for their lives. And Cyprian, who was the bishop, he was like the head pastor of the church in this city, rather than fleeing and telling the Christians to flee for their lives, he gathered all the Christians together in the center of the city, where they would normally get fed to lions. And he said to them this. Basically, he says, okay, if we want to know Jesus, and as he said, become rich through his poverty, right? As Jesus gave up his riches and became poor, if we want to know that same riches that he brings spiritually to his people, here's what we need to do. We need to give our personal and financial aid, care and comfort to all, according to their need, not according to their faith or their religion. In other words, you know what? Care and love the people here, whether they're Christians or pagans or whoever they are. And that was transformative. And then a little later in the 4th century, and this is a quote I'll pull up there. This is from Roman Emperor Julian, right? So this is after Christianity had become legalized and accepted in the Roman Empire. And Julian, he was a pagan emperor, and he tried to again eradicate Christianity. And so this is a writing that was found where he's writing to other priests, not Christians, right? Other pagan priests. He says this: "These impious Galileans not only feed their own poor, but ours also, welcoming them into their agape." Right? That's that Greek word that no one else used in the ancient world. Christians use it to describe the divine love. They welcome them into their agape. They attract them as children are attracted with cakes. Whilst the pagan priests neglect the poor, the hated Galileans devote themselves to works of charity, and by a display of false compassion have established and given effect to their pernicious errors. You can tell he doesn't like them, right? See their love feasts and their tables spread for the poor. Such practice is common among them and causes a contempt for our gods. Right? So this was this defining aspect of the ethic of love of the early church, was that their love wasn't limited to their own camp, right? To their own people. In the same way today, followers of Christ are called to be peacemakers, to be bridge builders. And it's this ethic of costly love that transforms societies throughout history. Now, sometimes we think of love and we think of more sentimentality, right? Christian love is not sentimentality. It's not just a politically correct tolerance, right? It's rooted in a kind of countercultural backbone that allows you to speak with love and with truth at the same time. Now, there's a great quote, Pastor Tim Keller, he talks about this. He says this, he says, "Love without truth is sentimentality. It supports and affirms us, but keeps us in denial about our flaws. Truth without love is harshness. It gives us information, but in such a way that we cannot really hear it. God's saving love in Christ, however, is marked by both radical truthfulness about who we are, yet also radical unconditional commitment to us." And then he goes on and gives an illustration from the early church. He says this, "The early church was strikingly different from the culture around it in this way. The pagan society was stingy with its money and promiscuous with its body. A pagan gave nobody their money and practically gave everybody their body. And the Christians came along and gave practically nobody their body, and they gave practically everybody their money." Wow. This is so needed in our culture today. Followers of Jesus to have a model of both truth and love. But honestly, if you're on social media, even a little bit, and you know about the culture war, right? The idea of the culture war, the left and the right, and all these different perspectives, just like battling it out. And sadly, too often Christians think they take a stand for truth, they forget about love, and then it just ends up being judgmentalism, right? We too easily stigmatize and stereotype those who are different than us. And too often, and this happens in church all the time, there's this us-them dichotomy and separation. Us in here and them out there in the culture. Okay. You can stand here. But you see in the scriptures, right? Throughout the whole Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, there is this, one of the main points is that God chose Israel not because they were so special, but because of his love and grace and choice of them. Right? And then we get to the New Testament and we realize, we hear things like what you have that has not been given to you as a gift. We realize that everything we have is a gift. And so we can't look down on anyone. So there's no us-them dichotomy and separation. Really, it's Jesus the Redeemer, right? And then the rest of us that need redemption. And that's the story of the scriptures. Now, if you're on social media, you see that. You know, guys, you gotta go. Shane, where do you go here? You gotta go sit down. Go sit in the front left if you want. So, go this week. You gotta go. Yeah. So you see how easy it is, right, with this divided nation, to jump on social media. And there's that temptation to just jump into the fight, right? And throw the word bombs at the other people. And to do it back and forth in the same way and engage in this culture war the same way that other people do. But when we get into the scriptures and we see the heart of Jesus, we see that he transcends our petty arguments. Right? So, I'm going to share a short video. Now, if you've been in grassroots for a long time, I shared this in the early days. And I feel like, in a very funny and profound way, it hits on this, on the culture war, and how we stigmatize and stereotype and judge from a distance those that are different than us, and never actually enter into dialogue and conversation. So I'm going to play it. And yes, there's stereotypes. Yes, you might be offended. It's okay. It's okay. You expected to be offended when you came to church, right? And then also it's a little dated. So just when they talk about Bush, just put in the next favorite president that you want to put in there. Now, and then don't check volume, but it should work.
and tree killing regional leaders of sale. Frat housing, cake tapping, shirt tucking in, backslapping, haters of hippies like me. Tree hugging, peace loving, hot smoking, porn watching, lazy hippies like me. Tree hugging, love making, pro-choice and gay wedding, widespread digging hippies like me. Skin color blinded, conspiracy minded, protesters of corporate greed. We who have nothing, and most likely will till we all end up locked up in jails by conservative Christian, right-wing Republican, straight white American men. Diamonds and dogs, boys and girls, living together in two separate worlds, following leaders up mountains of shame, looking for someone to blame. Diamonds and dogs, boys and girls, living together in two separate worlds, following leaders of mountains of shame, looking for someone to blame. I know who I like to blame. Conservative Christians, right-wing Republican, straight white American male, soul-saving, flag-waving, rush-loving, land-paving, personal friends to the quail. White diligently worked so hard to keep the free reins of this democracy. From tree hugging, peace loving, pot smoking, barefoot, and folk singing hippies like me. Tree hugging, peace loving, pot smoking, porn watching, lazy hippies like me.
Were we successful in offending everyone in this room? Okay, actually, let's talk about it for a couple minutes, okay? What did you guys hear? What's that guy communicating in that song and the animation in the video?
You got a nice suit.
Say butterflies like hippies work.
Well, they keep the wetlands. Mountains of shame. Yeah, well, what do you think he means by that?
We have to change it because people are looking at us, not because it's a harm that we change. It's like you get shamed into being better.
Yeah, man.
We have a little bit of a hard time with the dichotomy thing because when you've only got one option or another, like you had to put the Christians on the side of all of the corporate, greed type things, and you added sexual perversity to the left wingers, and both of those things are not
Exclusive, yeah.
dichotomous. It's not one or the other.
Yeah. And don't we so often do that in the culture wars? Like we oversimplify and it's the us, them. Yeah. What else? They both blame each other. Yeah. You can't blame yourself. You can't take any responsibility. Yeah. So what's the view of that he had of a Christian? How would you summarize that? Patriotic, yeah.
Joy killer, though.
Yeah.
Greedy.
Narrow-minded.
He wrecks the environment, doesn't care about creation.
Dominant establishment.
Yeah. Moral majority. Yeah. Wow. So honestly, as I've I grew up around here and talked to people. My sense is that people who have kind of said, I don't want anything to do with Jesus, they haven't really rejected Jesus. They've actually just rejected the guy in the suit. Like at the end of the day, and of course it's a stereotype, and of course it's like taken to the like ludicrous, but sometimes I think we contribute to the stereotype, and we do feed that. And the reality is when you encounter the Jesus of the scriptures, right, he is not the corporate conservative poster boy for the moral majority, right? He's just not that. But at the same time, he's also not a polyamorous, gender neutral, like goddess child. Right? You also don't get that. There is something different that we encounter in the scriptures. So like even in the story of the Good Samaritan, right, in the text we read. So that sounds so welcoming and affirming, right? Love your enemies, right? This story of the Good Samaritan. Be the Good Samaritan, right? Jesus also said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Right? So there's grace and there's truth. Or if you know the story of the woman caught in adultery. It's very famous, right? So these important religious leaders, right, take this woman out to stone her. And they try to put Jesus in this conundrum, right? Are you gonna pick up a stone with us and like follow the law like you're supposed to? And he just says to them, right? He who has no sin, throw the first stone. And eventually they all drop their stones and walk away because they realize that, wow, you know what? I can't be judged over this woman. And then he turns to her and says, then neither do I condemn you. Right? But what's the last thing he says? Go therefore and sin no more. That's the grace and the truth. I don't condemn you. Right? He basically says, you are loved and accepted in your brokenness, in your shame. I do not condemn you. But turn from your adultery. Right? Turn from your adultery. Stop trying to sell your body to earn the approval and love and acceptance of the men around you. Right? The temple of your body is sacred, and that garden of your sexuality needs to be cultivated in that protective fence of lifelong covenantal love. So there is truth that can be hard to hear, but there's this love and this acceptance as we are. And that's that gospel. So here's the application piece. So how do we do that, right? Jesus, he does that, right? And we're really bad at it. We really are. We either err on the side of just kind of like wishy-washy, oh, I don't really know, and I don't know, the universe works good for you, and I do God, you do the universe, and oh, we're all happy. Or we're just like, how dare you say that, and we're throwing the word bombs. Like, but how do we follow Christ into the crazy world with compassionate hearts and prophetic voices? So that's the question. And if we had more time, I think we could talk about a lot of different things. But I have just one that we have time for. And that is simply to know your identity in Christ and to live it out. Know the identity you have as a loved child of God through Jesus. And you see that at the end of this passage, right? That we read in Luke. Like he says this, but love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. So know that identity that you have as children of God. But this is also not a path to get accepted with God. It's not like if you could just be loving and compassionate enough, if you could just forgive enough and stop holding grudges, then you can be accepted with God. Then you can know His love and grace. No. This is a description of what a child of God looks like. And a follower of Jesus, a child of God, they've received and experienced God's mercy. They've looked at the cross of Jesus and seen Jesus dying for and praying for His enemies. Like, you know those words, forgive them, Father, they don't know what they're doing. And when we see that, we realize, wow, you know what? I was one of those enemies that you loved and embraced. I ignored you. I ridiculed you. I wanted nothing to do with you, and you pursued me. Because you've done that, now I can love my enemies. I can lay my life down for my enemies. I know that I'm loved and accepted as I am, not as I should be. So I can start sharing that with others. I can start loving and accepting others as they are, not as they should be. And in fact, some of the biggest evidence is that we don't know the grace of God. And we're just playing the religious game, the holier than thou game, is that we're not loving and accepting of other people as they are. So one last thing. How do we know that's what it's saying? How do we know this isn't the path to acceptance with God, is just be this really loving and kind person? How do we know that it's actually the result of a spiritual rebirth? And this is the evidence of that transformation. Look at verse 27. He just says this, as he begins this little section. He says, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies." Now that's a little key word. I say to those who hear. So there was a bunch of deaf people listening, and he was like, we're ignoring the deaf people, we're going to talk to the people that have hearing. Is that what he's saying? No. There's a spiritual type of hearing. And you see it a little later in Luke chapter, let's look, chapter 8. He says this, in verse 8. He says, "And some fell into the good soil, and grew and yielded 100-fold." So he tells this parable of the 4 soils. And right after ending the parable, he says this. And as he said these things, he called out, "He who has ears, let him hear." And when his disciples asked him what this parable meant, he said, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of God. But for others they are in parables, so that seeing they may not see, and hearing they may not understand." So that word hearing is this key word, speaking about a spiritual hearing, speaking about a spiritual rebirth. It is a gift of revelation, just like I shared with the kids, right? Where Jesus prays right before the parable of the Good Samaritan. Thank you, God, you've actually hidden these things from all these people that were convinced that they had their acts together. And then you revealed it to all the humble people that knew they needed help, that knew they were sick and needed a physician. They knew that they could become like little children. Wow. Now, so that call. How do we have compassionate hearts and prophetic voices? He is saying to those who have that spiritual rebirth, you can love your enemies. Right? We can't do it on our own strength. Right? The liberal progressive mind loves the idea of loving our enemies. Right? Oh, it sounds so sweet and beautiful and loved and accepting. We love that idea. It's a great concept. Hey, what's your road rage like, right? What happens when someone deeply offends you, deeply hurts you? You know, we don't have the resources on our own to consistently, genuinely love and forgive our enemies, to bless and do good to those who harm us. We don't have it in us. And then, right, if you're listening, you're like, no, of course I do that. I'm like, well, you know what, to do that, you have to then, therefore, water down the definition of love. Sure, I love my enemies. Yeah, well, your love has become sentimentality again. But that doesn't do anyone any good. Right? So the call of love can only come through that spiritual rebirth. The call of loving our enemies and forgiving, right? Not just those that can give in return, right? Because anyone does that. But to actually love, to be like the early Christians, to stay in Carthage, right, at the risk of their lives, and care for the pagans who maybe the week prior were cheering on the death of their brother or sister or father or mother. And then to go to them and be like, hey, I'm gonna heal your wounds. At the cost of probably getting sick myself, I'm gonna care for you. Like, how do you get those resources? It comes from Jesus. It comes from what we would call a cruciform life, a life conformed to the cross. Where do we have that? So that's the last question, right? If it comes through Jesus, if it's our identity in Christ that can bring that to us, how do we walk in that identity? How do we find our satisfaction in it? And how does that break down those culture war barriers? Right? I think it's simply this. When you're fully satisfied in your identity as a loved child of God, you no longer seek to find your meaning in all those other labels and kind of mini identities that the culture gives you. Right? You no longer find your meaning, your value, your significance and worth in your political affiliation, or your race, or your subculture, or your economic success, or your sexual orientation, or your nation of origin, or your level of education. Those same things stop being something that defines your identity because you're satisfied in who God says you are in Christ. And when your identity is built on that, you don't have to posture yourself as the moral authority and the better over other people, right? To kind of try to get a little above because you're like, dude, I'm just in the ground. And I'm just a beggar seeking mercy, but I've been accepted and loved. And on the other side, you don't have to be envying and always challenged and threatened by someone else a little more successful than you, or a little smarter, or a little better at being a vegan, whatever it might be, right? You don't have to be threatened anymore. You can be as you are, accepted through God's grace. Now, just in closing, our society loves to give labels, right? And put us in boxes. Even this brother here had such a great insight about the song, right? It creates the two boxes. And you gotta it's one or the other. I gotta throw you in one of the boxes. Right? Our society loves to do that. And my prayer for Grassroots Church is that you don't fit in the box. Right? Jesus doesn't fit in a box. Right? You can't just label him as this. Because here's what happens. If you can just be put in a box, if you're the guy with the suit, or you're the hippie pervert, and you just get in that box, people ignore you, like, oh, I don't know who you are, you're that. Right? But if you follow Jesus, you're going to be offensive to the liberals and the conservatives. Right? You're going to be like the early church, where you guard and protect the garden of your sexuality, and then you're just free and loving with all the material possessions and the things that you have in your life and your family, and it's going to be weird. It's not going to fit into any box. And so that's my prayer for us, is that we don't fit in a box. We follow this Jesus, and we defy categorization, right? And when you do that, they can't ignore us anymore, right? Because there's something different, something totally weird and awesome at the same time, something repulsive and attractive. And that's what Jesus is like. When we take him full strength and we don't water him down. And so that's my prayer for all of us. And I've seen that. I've seen that in all of you. And I see how that's continued over the years. My prayer is that it would continue for many years to come. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you that you are full of grace and love and mercy. And you have given yourself for your enemies. We do love you, Jesus. I pray for this church and this community that we would be shaped by the cross and not by labels and categories and caricatures and stereotypes. But we would defy all of that and just be totally weird and follow that wild man Jesus wherever he goes and wherever he leads us. We love you. We pray for those that are on that fence and wrestling through these questions. I pray that they would not be turned off by all the weaknesses in your church, but instead would embrace this love in Christ. In Jesus' name, amen. So I'm going to take, what time do we usually